Hi, everybody. My name is Brian Moore, and I'm a senior data visualization and analytics consultant with Clear Intelligence. And this is part 2 of our 4-part series on building better dashboards through interactivity. Today, we're going to be covering how to use bands as KPI selectors, which is a really great way to add just a ton of flexibility to your dashboards. If you check the notes below the video, you'll find links to a copy of the dashboard on Tableau Public that you can download and follow along, as well as a link to the blog post that just kind of walks through everything step by step. We'll start with just a quick demo of these KPI selectors. So up at the top here, you'll see we have a few bands showing various KPIs. We have sales, profit, units sold, and the percentage of shipments that were on time. So bands are really common in business dashboards. They give you a quick, prominent view of the state of your KPIs. And I usually like to include some type of growth or change indicator just to give that number some context. So here we have those up or down arrows with the percent change from the previous period. So these are used a lot in executive reporting, but today we'll show you how they can be used effectively in our more detailed, more exploratory, and interactive dashboards. So when I click on one of these bands, a few things will happen. So first off, all of the views in the dashboard change. So when you first come in, sales is selected. All of these worksheets are showing sales, but then you can click on profit. Everything changes to profit, units sold. This just kind of allows you to do a deeper dive into each of the individual KPIs, but without using a ton of real estate. So just using this one dashboard, we're able to really analyze all of these KPIs. You'll also see that the number formatting changes when I click on one of these. So when I click on sales or profit, we have this currency formatting. When I click on units sold, you'll see everything changes to whole numbers. When you click on on-time shipments, you'll see that everything changes to percentages. And lastly, you may notice that this chart here, depending on what KPI is selected, actually changes. So when we have sales, profit, or units sold selected, we have an area chart. And then when we have on-time shipment selected, you'll see that this changes to kind of a sparkline chart here. So I'm going to show you how to do all of these things today. We have a lot to cover, so we're going to dive right in. All right, so first I'm going to go to my first band, which is sales, and I'm going to create a calculated field. And this is just going to be called sales, and it's just going to be the word sales. I'm going to drag that to detail. And I'll repeat that for my profit band. It's going to create a calculated field called profit, which is just going to be the word profit. And I'm going to drag that to detail. And then I would repeat that for my other bands as well. For this part of the video, I'm just going to focus on sales and profit, but anything I do here, you would just repeat for every band that you have. All right, next we're going to create a parameter for our KPIs where the values kind of align to our calculated fields. So I have this parameter called metric select. It's a string parameter currently set to sales. And then our list of values, we're going to have sales, profit, quantity, and shipping, which are going to align to these 4 calculations that we had just built. And then you can alias these as well. So I'm going to just change how a couple of these display. Also, since we're going to be using parameter actions, you don't necessarily have to make this a list. If you're not doing any aliases, you could just select all and just rely on whatever value is being passed into the parameter. Right. So hit OK. Next, we're going to create a calculated field that represents whatever measures selected in our parameter. So I have a calculated field here called metric calc. This says when this parameter equals sales, and display the sum of sales. When it's set to profit, then display the sum of profit. When it's quantity, sum the quantity. And when it's shipping, use this other calculated field that we had created for our shipment percentages. Now, in each of the worksheets in our view, we want to take that metric calc that we had just built, and that's what we want to display. So in our bar charts, we're going to have that on columns, and that's going to be the value displayed there. In our map here, we're going to put it on color. In our area charts and our line charts, we're going to put it on rows. We just want to make sure that that is the measure that's being displayed in all of our worksheets in the dashboard. And then lastly, we're going to add a parameter action for each one of our bands. So I'm going to go to Dashboard, Actions. I'm going to add a parameter action. And this is going to be called Select Sales. I'm just going to bulk deselect all of these. And then I'm going to select just my sales band, which is this part 2 band sales. Under target parameter, we want that metric select parameter that we just built. And since this is sales, we want to pass that sales field that we had added to detail. And I'm going to do the same thing for profit. We'll call this select profit. And deselect all of the other sheets and select just this part 2 band profit. Our target parameter is going to be metric select. And we just want to pass that word profit. All right, so now when I click on one of these bands, you'll see that the whole dashboard changes to display that metric. But we still have a few issues here. The first of which is when you click on one of these bands, you'll see the whole thing highlights in blue. In this dashboard, it doesn't look too bad, but in most cases, it won't fit your color scheme as well as this does. So you'll want to address that. So in the previous video, I'd shown you a way to remove that default highlighting using a highlight action. Unfortunately, that method does not work very well with text marks, but there is another method that we can apply using filter actions. So I'm going to go back to my worksheet here, and I'm going to create 2 calculated fields. They're just going to be 0. So we're going to call this 0. It's just going to be the value of 0. And another one called 1. That's just the value of 1. I'm going to drag both of those to detail. And I'm going to drag those to detail on all of my bands. Oops. And I'm going to go back to my dashboard. I'm going to add an action. We'll add a filter action. And we'll start with sales. I'm just going to call this sales highlight. So from our source sheets, we want to select just that part 2 band sales worksheet. Under target sheets, rather than selecting it from the list here, we actually want to select it from the dropdown. We want to run this action on select. Under target filters, we're going to click selected fields and add a filter. Under the source, we're going to choose our 0 field, and under the target, we're going to choose 1. Hit OK. And then we're going to repeat that for profit. So we're going to add another filter action. This one will just be called profit HL. We'll select our profit worksheet. Under source sheets, under target sheets, we'll select that from the dropdown. We're going to run that on select. Under target filters, we'll click selected fields, add a filter. And we're going to choose 0 and 1. OK. Now you see when you click on one of these KPIs, you'll see all of the worksheets change to show that KPI, but we no longer have that default highlight. And similar to part 1 of this video, we've now removed the default highlighting, but it's difficult to tell now which KPI is selected. And once again, we're going to remedy that with color. So I'm going to go back to my worksheet here. I'm going to create one more calculated field for each of my bands. It's just going to be a simple Boolean calc. So for sales, call this KPI selected sales, and it's just going to say our metric parameter equals sales. I'll drag that to color. Then I'm just going to set the color for the true and false values. So in this workbook, when something is true, I have it set to blue. When it's false, I have it set to gray. And I go to profit. Again, I'm going to create that same Boolean calc, but this time for profit. And I will drag that to color and update the colors accordingly. So now whichever metric is selected will turn blue, and you'll see that the other one turns gray. You can take this a step farther by hold Control and drag that same field to text. I'm just going to Clean up that formatting a little bit. I'm going to repeat that for profit. I'll drag that to text. Clean up the format. So now when this one is selected, you'll see this says viewing sales. If I was to select any of the other KPIs, you'll see now that there are instructions here to say click to view sales. And to do that, so basically we took a true false calculation, we dragged it to text, and we can edit the alias so it displays what we wanted to display. So if I go to my KPI selected sales, go to aliases. So when this is true, meaning that the sales KPI is selected, I want this to display as viewing sales. When it's false, meaning any other KPI is selected, I want this to display as click to view sales. You can see when sales is selected, this says viewing sales. When anything else is selected, it'll say click to view sales. And you can do that on each of your bands. All right, so now we have our KPI selectors in place, but there is still another issue. So most of these metrics should have different number formats. So we have two that are currency. We have units sold, which is a whole number. And we have the on-time shipment, which should be a percentage. Now, in our worksheets, if we were to drag that metric calc to our label, we're only able to assign one value to that. So right now it's assigned an automatic number. So you can see when on-time shipment is selected, it's a decimal. When one of these currency metrics is selected, it's just a whole number. But what we want to do is dynamically format that depending on which KPI is selected. So there's a couple ways that you can do that. I'm going to review the one that kind of gives you the most control. So I'm going to go to my worksheet here. First, I want to drag that metric calc label off. Then I'm going to create a calculated field for each of my bands. So first for sales, I have a calculated field called label sales. This is just saying if that metric parameter equals sales, then return that metric calc value. And otherwise, it's just going to return a null value. Do the same thing for profit. If that metric parameter equals profit, then return that metric calc value. Otherwise, make it null. And I'll do that for all four of my bands. And then I'm going to drag all four of those out onto label. I'm going to edit the format on my label. I'll make these black just so we can see it. By default, it's going to put these on separate lines, but we want to bring them all onto the same line. So I'm just going to click in this empty space here and hit delete. Click delete, click delete. Now we have all four of them on the same row. And the way this is going to work is that 3 out of these 4 calculated fields will always return a null value, and the null values don't take up any space. So whichever one is not null will appear to just kind of move to the front of the line. I'll show you what I mean there. Change this back to white. So if we go back to our dashboard, when sales is selected, the other 3 labels are going to be null. So we just see the sales. When units sold is selected, these other 3 are going to be null, and that unit sold label kind of moves to the front. And the same thing with on-time shipment. And then you can just repeat that in each of your worksheets, and that works on both labels and in your tooltips as well. One more thing to consider is whether or not the same chart types would be applicable for all of your different metrics. So in this case, an area chart is probably a good choice for sales, profit, and units sold, but probably not the best choice for displaying the on-time shipment percentages. But the good news is that we can use some of the work that we've already done to swap charts depending on which KPI is selected. So first we want to create our alternate view. So I have these 2 views here. I have our kind of default area chart, but when shipments is selected, I want to display this kind of sparkline chart instead. So I've created both of those. I'm going to go back to my dashboard. I'm going to drag out a floating container. Currently in my dashboard, in all of the worksheets, I have some formatting. So I have a white border, and then I also have a white background set to 30%, which is kind of creates this light blue background because it's allowing the darker blue background to show through. So I'm just going to remove that formatting on my worksheet, and I'm going to add that formatting to my floating container. All right, now I'm going to take this worksheet and I'm going to drag that into my container. And I will select the container and size and position it to where my previous worksheet was. Then I want to take that other alternate sheet, which is right here, and drag that into my container. And we'll get rid of this newly auto container. We'll get rid of the title. So now we have both worksheets displayed here. So all we have to do is add a filter to just display one at a time, and the other one, because they're in a container, will just automatically collapse. So I'm going to go to my area chart. I'm going to create a calculated field called sheet swap filter. And this is just going to be a Boolean calc that says our metric parameter equals shipping. So right now you can see the metric is set to units sold. So this is going to return a false value. I'm going to drag this to filter, and I want to filter this view to false. So I only want it to display when the metric select parameter is not set to shipments. I'll hit OK. Then I'm going to go to my shipment one. I'm going to drag out the same filter. And here, I'm going to filter on true. So here, I only want this view to display when the metric select parameter does equal shipments. It currently does not, so you'll see there's no data to display. Because there's no data to display, that automatically collapses down because it's in a container, and we just have our area chart. Once shipments is selected, the reverse will be true. The area chart will collapse, and just the line chart will be displayed. And the last thing I want to do is in each of our worksheet titles, we just want to add our parameter so it's very clear in each of the views exactly what's being displayed. So in each one of these, I'm just going to double click into the title. I'm going to go to insert. We're going to insert our parameter, metric select, into the title. Now our whole thing will be the parameter, and this is by region. So when we have sales selected, you see this is sales by region. Here we'll do the same thing. This is by subcategory. So now we have sales by subcategory. Then you can add it to the others to see sales over time, sales by state, and sales by manufacturer. So that's all for today. Keep an eye out for part 3 of the series, where we'll be talking about how to create scroll buttons to navigate through the records in a view. And thank you very much.